Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to take a look at what impacts manufacturing profitability.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're going to compare Western and Eastern Europe.
Okay.
And get this, our main source is a training document for CNC operators.
Oh, wow.
It actually claims that the cost of everything except labor is pretty much the same across Europe.
Now, that's interesting. You'd think raw materials, maybe energy costs would be different. But yeah, that is pretty interesting.
Right, makes you want to dig a little deeper. But before we get into all that,
Sure.
can you give a quick rundown of what a CNC operator even does?
Oh, absolutely.
And why they're so important to manufacturing?
So a CNC operator, they basically work with, these computer numerical control machines, highly precise automated systems. They cut, shape, fabricate all sorts of parts. Think of anything from like car components to medical devices.
I see.
These operators are the ones who make sure everything is made accurately and efficiently.
So they're like the backbone of modern manufacturing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. Now, this training document that we're looking at is titled, I'm going to butcher this, Păzia Operatorului CNC.
Okay.
And it seems to be from Romania.
Interesting.
What grabbed our attention is its bold claim about workforce quality being the key differentiator between Western and Eastern European manufacturing.
Yes. And that's really, at the core of their argument. And it kind of flips the script on how we think about manufacturing costs. You always think about things like raw materials and energy prices being these big kind of swing factors. But this document, it breaks things down in a very different way.
Okay, let's get into that cost breakdown then. What specific categories does it actually compare?
So they look at a range of categories, things that you'd think would vary quite a bit from region to region. So things like machine tools, cutting tools, even the emulsions and filtration systems that are used in machining.
Okay.
Raw materials. And by that, I mean semi-finished products. They also look at fuel and electricity.
And what they're saying is all of these costs are pretty much the same in both Western and Eastern Europe.
Well, that's what they're suggesting. It's definitely a surprising assertion. Makes you wonder if there are other factors or maybe nuances they aren't considering.
Right. Makes you wonder if they're hiding something.
Yeah.
Okay, so if all of those costs are essentially the same,
Yeah.
what's driving the difference in profitability?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
They claim that production labor costs are up to 5 times lower in Eastern Europe.
Wow, 5 times lower. That's a massive difference. So they're saying labor is the make or break factor when it comes to manufacturing in these regions.
That appears to be their central point.
Okay.
And it makes you think, what contributes to such a massive difference in those labor costs? Is it just wages? Or are there other factors at play here? Like, are there hidden costs in Western Europe? Maybe things like higher taxes or more robust social safety nets? Could it be that Eastern Europe is underinvesting in areas like worker benefits or safety?
Right.
And these are all questions that the document doesn't really address, but they are definitely worth thinking about.
Absolutely. It's a bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
This focus on labor costs seems to connect to the document's emphasis on training and professional development, especially in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And they argue that to really increase profitability, to be able to compete globally, Eastern Europe needs a highly skilled workforce. And that's where this whole training document comes into play. It's almost like they're saying, look, we've got this advantage with labor costs, but we need to invest in our workforce if we want to reach our full potential.
So it's not just cheap labor,
Right.
it's skilled labor.
Exactly.
But here's something else that caught my eye. The document mentions functional illiteracy and high unemployment rates in Eastern Europe.
Yes, that's a really important point.
What does that mean for their argument?
Now, when they say functional illiteracy, they're talking about people lacking, basic reading and math skills. Skills that you need to succeed in a modern manufacturing environment.
Oh, I see.
So think about being able to read technical manuals or understand safety instructions or even just interpret, data on a machine interface.
Gotcha.
All those things require a certain level of literacy.
So even if there are tons of unemployed people, if they don't have those basic skills,
Right.
it doesn't really matter.
It creates a really tricky situation.
Yeah.
And it highlights the need for, more targeted training and education programs that can help people get those necessary skills. And this all kind of ties into another important theme that they touch upon.
Okay.
Automation.
Ah, yes. the robot in the room.
Exactly.
Automation is always presented as the solution to rising labor costs and skill shortages, but is it really that simple?
Well, if it were that easy, we'd all be out on the beach somewhere relaxing while the robots did all the work. But the reality is that automation itself needs a skilled workforce.
Of course. You need people to design the systems and program them and maintain them.
Exactly. You need people to run those systems.
Yeah.
And that requires a whole different skill set than traditional manufacturing.
So it's not about replacing humans with machines, it's about humans and machines working together.
That's a great way to put it.
So automation is actually changing what kind of skills are needed. It's not just about a lack of basic skills anymore. It's about being able to keep up with new technology.
Exactly. Workers need to be, flexible and willing to learn new skills as things change. And this kind of brings us to another interesting trend that links back to this whole training document.
What's that?
Reshoring.
Reshoring. That's when companies bring manufacturing back home after years of moving things overseas.
Yeah, that's exactly it. For a long time, companies were focused on finding the absolute cheapest labor, which usually meant offshoring to other countries. But now things are starting to change.
So even if labor costs are higher in some places, some companies are finding it's worth it to have skilled workers closer to home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a complex equation for sure. But that seems to be what people are starting to realize. And it's interesting how this document's focus on training and a skilled workforce actually lines up with this whole idea of reshoring.
For sure. It really highlights how important it is to invest in people, in their skills, not just for individual businesses, but for entire economies. But who is actually responsible for all this? Governments, schools?
Got to be a team effort.
Yeah.
We need to see more investments in things like vocational training, apprenticeships, and partnerships between, companies and schools. We need to create a pipeline of talent that can meet the demands of this industry.
And it's not just about technical skills, is it? We've touched on this before, but problem solving, creative thinking, being able to adapt, these are all super important in today's workplace.
Absolutely. And as technology keeps advancing, that ability to learn and change will only become more and more valuable. It's almost like job descriptions are becoming less rigid. What we call skilled labor today could be totally different in a few years.
That's a great point. And it makes me think back to that educational program for cutting tools in our Romanian document. Even though it focuses on those very specific technical skills, like how to read those drawings, there's a bigger message in there. It's about, giving workers the tools they need to succeed.
Yeah, you're right. It's about giving workers the knowledge and understanding to not just do the job, but to be great at it, to actually contribute to their companies.
Because when you have skilled workers, you have higher productivity, better products, and ultimately everyone makes more money. Which brings us back to that claim that caught our attention in the first place, that the cost of everything but labor is pretty much the same across Europe.
Exactly. And when you think about automation and reshoring and how the whole idea of work is changing, it really seems like investing in people is the best way to succeed, no matter where you are.
I think you're right. It makes you wonder if labor really is the most important thing. How do we help workers reach their full potential? What does that actually look like?
That's a great question, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about next.
Awesome.
We've talked about a lot already, but I think the best part is coming up.
So we've been going on and on about this Romanian training manual for CNC operators and how it's all about a skilled workforce. But does this whole laser focus on labor costs and training, does that even apply to other parts of the world? Is this just a Romania thing or is it bigger?
That is the big question, isn't it?
Yeah.
What I find so interesting is that even though this document is talking about one region and one specific industry,
Yeah.
it does touch on some, universal truths about manufacturing. It's like we're getting this tiny glimpse, but it tells us something about what's happening everywhere.
Yeah. It's like a microcosm or something.
Exactly.
Okay. Speaking of the bigger picture, let's talk about automation for a second.
Sure.
It's always being talked about as the solution to, those rising labor costs, skill shortages, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But is it really that straightforward?
Well, I mean, if it were, we'd all be sitting pretty, right?
Yeah.
Robots doing all the work.
Yeah.
But the thing is, even automation needs people.
Right. You need people to actually build the robots and program them.
Exactly. And to fix them when they break down.
Yeah.
And those jobs, they require a whole different set of skills than the old factory jobs.
So it's not about replacing humans. It's about teamwork.
Yeah. humans and robots working together.
So really, automation is kind of changing what kind of skills we need. It's not just about not having those basic skills. It's about keeping up with, like, all the tech stuff.
You got it.
Yeah.
Workers need to be flexible, willing to learn as things change,
Mm.
And this kind of brings us to another interesting trend, one that connects back to this training document.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
Reshoring.
Reshoring.
Yeah. Remember we talked about how companies moved manufacturing overseas?
Yeah.
Well, reshoring is when they bring it back.
So wait, even if it costs more to have workers here, some companies are deciding it's worth it.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, it's a tough decision, a lot to consider, but having those skilled workers closer to home,
Yeah.
it can be a real advantage. And, it's interesting how this document, with its focus on training and skilled workers, actually fits into this whole reshoring thing.
It's all connected. It really shows how important it is to, invest in people, not just for individual companies, but for the whole country.
Absolutely.
So who's responsible for actually, like, making sure people have these skills?
I think everyone's got to be involved. Governments, schools, businesses, everyone. We need more vocational training, apprenticeships, and partnerships between companies and schools. Got to make sure we have enough skilled people to fill those jobs.
Right. And it's not just, like, knowing how to use a machine. It's about problem solving, thinking outside the box, that kind of stuff.
You're absolutely right. And the more technology changes, the more important those skills will become.
Yeah.
It's almost like the whole idea of what skilled labor means. It's evolving.
Yeah. It's not the same as it was, like, 50 years ago.
Right.
This makes me think about that educational program for cutting tools from the document.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it focuses on technical stuff like how to read drawings, but there's a bigger message there,
Yeah.
about empowering workers, giving them what they need to actually succeed.
I think you're spot on. It's not just about doing a job, it's about being good at it.
And when workers are good at their jobs, everyone wins. Higher productivity, better products, more money. And that brings us right back to that first big claim.
The cost of everything but labor is pretty much the same. It's wild, right? When you look at automation, reshoring, how work is changing, it really seems like investing in people is the key.
That's a powerful argument. It makes you wonder, how do we actually unlock that potential? What are the concrete steps?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's what we're going to dig into next.
Perfect. I'm ready.
Buckle up, because things are about to get really interesting.
Wow. We started with a training manual and ended up talking about the entire future of manufacturing.
It's crazy how one little document can lead to such a huge discussion.
It's like we keep peeling back the layers and finding more stuff to talk about. But okay, let's circle back to that main idea. If labor cost really is the most important thing, what can we do to, like, close the gap between Western and Eastern Europe?
That's a really tough question. But it's not just about how much people are paid. It's about making sure workers have everything they need to be successful.
So we need to invest in training and stuff, but also, like, create a culture of learning. And maybe we need to rethink what skilled labor even means.
You got it. Instead of trying to copy what Western Europe does, maybe Eastern Europe needs to find its own way. There's no magic formula that works everywhere.
Makes sense. But do you think this document is missing anything? Are there other things that could be affecting profitability besides labor?
That's a good point. They mostly talk about labor, but what about infrastructure, supply chains, access to technology?
Right. It's easy to get focused on one thing and miss the bigger picture. This document gives us some clues, but it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Exactly. That's why it's so important to look at things from different angles, and to always dig deeper.
And that's what we've tried to do in this deep dive. We started with a simple training manual and ended up talking about automation, reshoring, skills gaps, investing in people. It's been quite a journey.
It really has. And like most journeys, we end up with more questions than answers.
But that's okay, right? It means we're still learning and trying to understand how things work.
I think that's a good thing. Wanting to learn more, that's what keeps us moving forward.
So, to wrap things up, we want to leave you with this thought. If labor is the real secret to success in manufacturing, how do we help workers all over the world reach their full potential? What needs to change?
And what about all the other possibilities out there? Maybe there are solutions we haven't even thought of yet.
Maybe the answers are out there, waiting for us to discover them. So keep thinking about these questions, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going. The world of manufacturing is constantly changing, so the ability to learn and adapt is the most important thing.
Couldn't have said it better. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.